Okay, so apologies for the last live stream completely failing. We've had a few technical glitches. I had to completely reset the system, completely reset the internet. We had to completely reset the whole lot, which is a bit annoying. We were discussing obviously the World Cup with certain sides like Portugal, Belgium, Germany, obviously having disappointing tournaments and not progressing as far as people anticipated. Um, and you know, it is frustrating when the technology lets you down. And we've had a lot of where I live, a lot of infrastructure upgrades with the internet and the um, 4G and 5G network. Yeah, I had to completely reset the entire system. Completely reset it from scratch, which is really frustrating. And then the system froze, and then I had to completely shut the system down and restart everything. It took a 20-minute process, and when I logged back on, it still showing a live stream, even though I'd completely cut the feed and had to repower and reboot everything. It was frustrating. It happens. It's not the first time it's happened. It won't be the last. They've been working on the mobile phone mast. I have mobile internet. I have a little just get this little wireless dongle here, which is off the mobile phone 4 and 5G network. They've been doing stupid amounts of work over the last few days in my local area. They shut one of the roads down. They were completely putting up a brand new mast. They were doing maintenance. They've shut another road up the road, which was frustrating this morning when I had to go to Costco for me shopping with my mum. We had to take a long diversionary route to get there, and then another diversionary route to get back, which was frustrating. And it is what it is. On the sporting side of things, and I want to go back to both Wales and England in the rugby union, which I think has been massively overlooked over the last couple of days because of the Football World Cup and the exploits of teams, both good and bad. In the case of yeah, my internet's been dodgy since I left 5 minutes away from the airport, so I never have a stable connection. Look, I live 500 meters away from one mast and 50 meters away from another one, and there's a third one 200 meters down the road. I'm in a nice triangular area. Never seems to work properly, which is absolutely frustrating. And I do apologise, obviously, for the technical failures that we've had. It may go again. If it goes again, I'm going to call it a night, but we'll try and soldier on with the tech. In regards to the rugby union side of things, which I do think has been massively overlooked this week with the World Cup going on, and obviously Wales and the World Cup not fulfilling their potential in the group stage and being very disappointing, and England. Apart from that disappointing game against the US, have played very, very well. Um, and there are other teams that I feel could have contributed more. Other teams, it's been a learning experience, like the Canadians, for example. That's a learning experience for them, taking to the World Cup in 3.5 years' time, and they co-host. The Mexicans, for me, were disappointing as well, very disappointing. Uruguay were disappointing. That's another side that failed to live up to expectations with the players they had available and how they played. They're under investigation by FIFA for their post-match. Um, 4 players in the Uruguayan FA are under investigation for what happened post-match there. That hasn't been talked about massively, and we'll see what punishments are handed out to the Uruguayan FA and the 4 players under investigation and the coach. I think, and the connections going again. So we're going to try and soldier on for as long as we can. And if it goes, it goes. I can't guarantee that um, we'll be able to get this through. Uruguay probably should have went through that. I mean, yes, the frustrations did boil over, and rightly so. They're under investigation for it. Um, I think when someone like Edison Cavani loses his cool, that is a serious frustration there. Um, look, you know, um, the Ronaldo situation with Portugal has been well discussed in international media. It's a carry on, I believe, from the Man United situation and the Piers Morgan um, interview that he gave that was not sanctioned by the club. Um, whatever's happened at Man United is a long-standing problem. The Ronaldo situation is a symptom of bad ownership, basically, and a lack of leadership within the boardroom, with the ownership of the Glazer family, and that's been a deteriorating situation for some time in regards to what's happening at Manchester United and the potential possibility of a sale. Yeah, there's all sorts going on. Well, what we know and don't know. I mean, we'll see what happens in regards to the Ronaldo situation with his club. I mean, apparently Messi's been linked with a move to the MLS. Um, how Leeds, they were a rough team in the sense of with Leeds United under Don Revie, they were they even by 1960s and 70s standards, they pushed the boundaries of what was acceptable on a football field. On more than one occasion, there was a famous incident against Derby County where they came to blows when Brian Clough was manager of Derby County before he went on to be Leeds manager for 44 days. Um, they really pushed the boundaries of what was acceptable under Don Revie. They were a physical side, and that's an understatement. Um, Billy Bremner, for example, really he was an irritant. Um, in regards to um, what would be acceptable today, that entire team would be suspended for foul play. They would the club would be heavily fined for failure to control their players. But then clubs like Chelsea and Manchester United, all the other clubs bit and fought back. And it's the same with Wimbledon with the crazy game. Um, and again, that their antics in the 80s and the 90s would not with Vinnie Jones and Fashanu, for example, would not be tolerated today. Dennis Wise would not be tolerated today. Um, and the sport has evolved, and you can get, you know, I suppose Atletico Madrid is possibly the closest you're going to get in the modern game to under Diego Simeone to what Leeds United and Wimbledon were like in the 60s, 70s, 80s, and 90s. That's the closest you're going to get in modern terms, and they are babies compared to they're pussycats compared to the Don Revie lead sides. You just got to look at the footage, which is on the internet. You can get back catalogue DVDs of the football in the 70s. It was like the Broad Street Bullies with the Philadelphia Flyers in the NHL. They decided to physically intimidate um, opposition team. They had skill, but they also decided to physically intimidate more than what was deemed normal at the time. And then what a lot of hockey fans call the goon era comes in, the fighting. Even though it was already in the game, they took it to another level. And other teams like Boston and Detroit and then with Joey Casseur and Bob Probert and then Ty Domi with the Jets and the Maple Leafs and others took it to another level. And the Italian teams were very cynical. They were brutal, but not on the Leeds United level. Like the Grande Inter side of the 60s and 70s were physical and could definitely kick you to death, but not on the level of Leeds United. They took it to that next level. Um, French rugby, South African rugby, yeah, absolutely. There's that in there. The state of origin back in the 80s and the 90s was just punch up after punch up. The NRL until about 10 years ago was just all in brawls. They brought in rules in certain sports to curb the violence on the field or on the ice or on the court. They brought in specific rules whereby you know players would get lengthy suspensions, coaches would get bench bans, fines would be dished out on unprecedented levels. Unprecedented levels. Um, and Leeds did tinker their kit to match Real Madrid, but they always, had either blue or yellow as their kit colours. In regards though to what we see today, look at the 1974 match between in the World Cup between Holland and Brazil at the '74 World Cup. One of the dirtiest games in the modern era. And the Brazilians are famed for their samba football in the 50s, 60s, and 70s, and into the 80s, with some great players like Rivellino, Zico, Pele, all these fantastic, Jorginho, fantastic players. That match, Samba football, total football, became the nastiest game. Apart from the Battle of Santiago in '62, between Italy and Chile, where the police got involved. Um, and then you had the Dutch team in '78 realised actually we can play dirty and play effectively. The Argentina team in '78 were the same. And then the Belgian team in '82 kicked the crap out of Maradona for fun. And it was another level that the Argentinians weren't expecting. And then in '86, and it progresses. And then there comes a moment where Pele's on the apparently he's not as serious as press reports. There's been another statement issued by his family, by his daughter, I believe, saying, "Hey, look, it's a routine appointment. He's in for routine tests. He's got cancer. It's manageable." The initial press report was complete and utter bullshit. He's expected home soon. He is not very well. He's an elderly man. He's 82. He's got an aggressive form of colon cancer. He's not in the best of health, but he's not in harm's way. Let's be realistic. There was some big false stories coming out. Now he could be seriously ill, but he's responded. He's going in for his routine monthly checkup, which you have to do as a cancer patient at his age with the cancer he has. But no, the Leeds way, and then what we see with the crazy gang in the 80s and the 90s were Wimbledon. Other teams didn't like it. It put them off their stride, and there's a reason why they go down in folklore as dirty teams. They pushed the boundaries of what they could get away with, and yes, players were sent off and suspended, and the clubs were fined, and the game has evolved. In the sense of, yes, their style of football was anti-Leeds, but they could be dirty if they wanted to. There's a famous footage. Rivellino is the Brazilian captain, and I believe it was Ari Hahn just comes up and just straight away, and then tries to. I think he fractured his eye socket, and Rivellino doesn't go down and roll around like he's been shot. He's like, okay, I'm going to carry on and play on. Then I'm the best player in the world because Rivellino was the best player in the world at the time. Whatever. But yeah, Ari Hahn gives him a straight elbow, and it is caught on camera, and there's footage of it, and then there's some, as the commentators call it, more ugliness, and it was a brutal game. Yeah, Schumacher versus Battiston in '82 broke his neck, and Harold Schumacher was well known for being the dangerous sweeper keeper. There's footage of, and again, the game has evolved. The speed of the game is faster. But then '66, the Portuguese kicked Pele out of the game. Pele was hacked out of the game, and yes, he comes back in 1970 and obviously does what he does. But the Portuguese, much like the Spain Holland final in 2010, was a nasty. The game, the Dutch side in 2010 was brutal, absolutely brutal. I mean, you look at that final, and the referee lost control. We can all agree on that. Howell Webb has a shocking game because he allowed the intent to injure. How Nigel de Jong stays on the field after what he does to Xabi Alonso's chest is, ridiculous. And we should not underestimate the brutality of that final 12 years ago. Argentina. Raton. Yeah, he gets sent off, and that's another infamous one. So there's a period from 1962 to the mid 80s where it was just pure warfare at club and international level, which today half those players are suspended for months, if not banned from the game. You couldn't do it now. They made rules in rugby league, the third man in. Eusebio scored the goals to kick Brazil out, but the Portuguese midfield and defence, their target was he's their main man. Let's take him out, and they did. They targeted him with aggressive tackling and marking, and yeah, they basically, I think they buggered his. I can't remember what they did. They did something to his knee. They targeted him all game, and they kicked him out of the game. George Best famously got hacked and slashed and stamped, and he would give it as good as he got, as well as scoring fantastic goals. If you're a Reading fan, Robin Friday in the 70s is someone of that sort of vintage in the lower divisions. Skillful player, but yeah, he got hacked, stamped, punched, kicked, elbow, and then he would give it back, and then he would score a fantastic goal. Maradona, um, throughout his career, and he would dish it back out. He started a riot between Athletic Bilbao and Barcelona, an inter-ethnic riot in Spain. Um, there's all sorts. I mean, there's all sorts. All sorts has happened, and yeah, Sean Dyche would be a good Atletico Madrid manager. Um, and then you got players like Vinnie Jones and Dennis Wise with the crazy gang of fashion, who some of their tackles were vile and obscene. Um, I've got the 70s Leeds squad, the suspensions that the FA would be handing out and the fines Leeds would have for failure to control their players. Once you get more than 5 bookings for a team, you get fined. The fair play. So if a team has more than 5 bookings in a game, they're getting a whacking fine. Um, and look, we've seen it with a lot of players. I mean, there was another game in the 2006 World Cup where there were what was it, 22 yellow card. I mean, every player got booked. 2 players, I think, with 2 send-offs or something. Ridiculous amount of bookings. I think it was Portugal versus the Netherlands in the 2006 World Cup. There have been games at tournaments which have become, well, violent. We've seen it in rugby league with State of Origin. We've seen it in the NHL, and they brought rules in the NHL. There was a what was it, the Good Friday Massacre, where the Quebec Nordiques were playing. I believe it was the Montreal Canadiens, and there was a 45-minute bench clearing brawl, or it might have been the Philadelphia Flyers, and the intensity between the two teams. I believe it was the Battle of Quebec, and the Nordiques were playing the Canadiens in the Montreal Forum, and it, it it became a bloodbath. And out of that particular game, there was another one with the Philadelphia Flyers and the Montreal Canadiens, a massive bench clearer, and they brought rules in to stop that, and massive fines, massive suspensions. Um, oh, Ben Flowers, oh yeah, Ohio, when he punched him on the ground and he actually left him with brain damage, and Ohio, these St Helens fly halfback retired. He never played a game since. He retired from the game due to post concussion syndrome. He had a fractured eye socket, believe a bleed on the brain. Never played again. Um, and Ben Flowers, he should never play. He's I think also been banned for steroids or something else. Absolutely distasteful and disgraceful. I'm all for having a bit of a biff in rugby league and ice hockey. I love the physical aspects, the battle that it is. But yeah, Ben Thatcher against Pedro Mendes, another disgraceful, absolutely disgraceful challenge that even by Don Revie standards, I think, would be unacceptable. You want to physically intimidate the opponent, don't kill him. And Pedro Mendes was exceptionally lucky that that wasn't a more serious injury. Ben Thatcher fully deserved his punishment, um, and rightly so. And the, some teams use that intimidation tactics to get inside players' heads to then give themselves a psychological advantage, knowing it's not going to be an easy game, especially if you're the away team and you're going into the Den at Millwall, for example, or you're going down the old plough lane at Wimbledon, or you're going to the Ellen Road and you knew you were in for it. Joe Barton, when he was playing for QPR, fighting half the Man City team. You know, there are certain players who are just not particularly pleasant. Joey Barton is not a particularly pleasant individual anyway. Um, and you know, there's been incidents where, as a manager now, I think believe he's a manager of Fleetwood Town now. He's had his incidents in the tunnel. There's been all sorts of allegations against him. Balotelli with the cigar butt in the player's face. All-time toughest team that I've seen play, or of all time, because if I was to do my tough guy 11 of players, we're having some. It won't be the most skillful team, I'll tell you that. Although they might be a bit skillful, I would definitely have Ibrahimovic in my team. I would definitely have Diego Costa in my team, because Duncan Ferguson, Roy Keane's got to be in there. Alf-Inge Haaland would be in there because he was a tough. I know Keane ended his career, but he nearly ended Keane's career. They hated each other. Um, Backline Thomas Repka and Jaap Stam. They're going to beat the shirt. Um, would I have Schumacher in goal? Or would I have Rene Higuita, because he was also equally insane? Yeah, I think Schumacher's the better goalkeeper because he could keep his cool. The players we're thinking of, I mean, Ben Thatcher wouldn't make the side because he didn't have the engine room that Vinnie Jones had. You would have Dennis Wise in there to wind them up. Um, you would have I would have Fabrizio Colaccini, because I remember he did a flying kung fu kick in a Confederations Cup game against Brazil when he conked the guy right in the chest. Willie Mason. No, Adrian Morley would have Willie Mason every day of the week. Um, so Harold Schumacher in goal. There's one for you. I would have Thomas Repka, Jaap Stam as the two centre backs. Um, I would actually have Ayala in the side. There you go. He was a tough bugger. He was hard but fair, but he's the tough bugger you have in the side. You would have I would have Simeone and Mascherano in the holding midfield. Um, I'll have Steve Bold in there as well in the squad. I would have Stevie Bold. He would snap your leg. Um, Suarez though is a bit more of a cowardly player, in a sense that he can dish it out but he can't take it. But there's so it's Vardy. He's a tough bugger. Jamie Vardy. Um, Dion Dublin and Robbie Savage. Oh, Vardy's brilliant, but then that's what Dennis Wise is for. Dennis Wise is more of an irritant than Vardy. Vardy's different. Vardy takes the abuse. He takes a lot of the physical. Um, I mean, there's some players. True, yeah, you could argue that he's off a Sheffield Council estate. You could definitely have that argument of having Jamie Vardy in the side because he's had a tough upbringing. You could argue that. Duncan Ferguson, though, he went to prison for shattering some guy's face on a football pitch. Deros, Neil Lennon, he was a gnarly midfielder. And then the list goes on. And then you could have Gentile, um, Cambiasso could dish it, Gabriela Hintzer. Um, there's some tough guys who played the game in the modern era, let alone in the 70s, 80s, and 90s. I mean, there's some tough players, tough players. Um, but imagine having a front three of Diego Costa, Ibrahimovic, and Vardy with you know Thomas Repka, Stam, Materazzi. I mean, Sergio Ramos. And Sergio Ramos can play right back or left back as well. He's very versatile. There are some to have a tough guy team would be ridiculous. Um, I mean, just some of the modern players would be done. Neymar would have his leg snapped in half. But any one of the Argentinian and Uruguayan players from the 90s and the 2000s, manager, Christ. But if Simeone's playing, you've got to have Mourinho as manager. I don't think Ferguson would accept that kind of ill discipline. There's a reason why Roy Keane was forced out of United and Stack for that matter. Um, because they kept putting the team in a bad spot by being suspended. Um, Nutcase 11. Oh god. Maybe I should do my hard man starting 11. Um, I'm sure I could find a whole host of players who will probably be suspended. Edmondo. Uh, Fernando Asprilla, just for the firearms offences alone. Um, Edmundo, Jesus. Um, some of the players are just, you're in for a game. I'd even have Mark Viduka in there because he was a physical lump who could dish out and take it. But all these tough guys we've mentioned could play. That is the scary thing. They all had skill, but they weren't just there to be a lump. Vinnie Jones was a box-to-box midfielder. Ray Parlour was a hard man as well. Um, who was the guy? 2008. Shit, was that Flamini? Was that Flamini? He's a tough bugger. And then you've got the entire bloody Italian defence of Baresi and Gentile and all that from the 80s and the 90s. Costa Curta, Nesta Maldini. I mean, Jesus Christ, some of the Italian defenders we could list off. Di Baggio, Dino Baggio. Amoruso was a bit of a hard nut. There's been some pretty gnarly players to play the game. Absolutely gnarly players playing the game over the years. To come up with a hard man starting, and then you got to think about the bench. Medel, he was an absolute unhinged loon. Some of these players, I mean, Medel, he just looked like he was a member of a cartel. Medel, yes, and then you got he played for Cardiff, and he literally looked like he was a cartel hitman. Crikey. I mean, Gaza could be a bit of a thug as well. Some of these players that we're talking about are exceptionally skilled. That's the scary thing. They could play. Ibrahimovic is one of the most skilled, versatile centre forwards the game has ever seen. And then you've got Maradona, who was literally a beer barrel on coke. And then you had Gabriel Batistuta, Veron, Simeone, Ayala, Zanetti, Milito, Colaccini, Marco Burgers. I remember I mean, this is in my youth. I mean, I remember the name rings a bell. But we are going back to when I was like 6 years old. That we're going back some. Tony Cottee, he was a good player. He could. Muzzy, is it? He's another one. I mean, Two Guy, he was a hard bastard. I remember the Two Guy. Who were we playing? And he basically throttled the guy. Guy got right in his face, and he just grabbed him and was like, "I'm going to kill you." Emre, there's another one. Formerly of Newcastle and Inter, Emre. He was a gnarly one. Adrian Mutu was a bit of a spiteful character. And then you had Canigia. He was a bit of a character. Morocco's run. Well, Morocco's an interesting country because of its, say, the Arabs and they're Africans. They're a bit of both. They've got a very mixed population, but I think it helps the African continent. If they get through to the semi-final, I think that, you know, definitely opens the conversation of improving quality, because they did bid for the next World Cup and they got turned down for reasons. Um, um, oh, cool. The South American, it's to do with their political and social culture. There's been a lot of military dictatorships, a lot of brutality politically and socially. A lot of them grow up in the favelas or um, the shanty towns. Um, there's a lot of poverty and gang violence, and it molds the people. Um, molds the people. Um, absolutely. Um, and Brazil, Argentina, Uruguay, all of them have had military. Chile with Pinochet, Brazil. Um, you've had the dirty war in Argentina. There was a military dictatorship in Paraguay, Bolivia, Colombia. They've all had military dictatorships at one point or another. They've been very repressive, very brutal, and it does shape the people. Um, and when Brazil were at their best, there was a military dictatorship, and it was great um, restriction on civil rights and civil liberties. There was brutality. Mexico, when they hosted both World Cups, had a military dictatorship, um, and it does shape the people, and it's borne out in the fact that football is an escape from the ills, and then you look at their football rivalries like Boca Juniors and River Plate, um, Newell's Young Boys, and then you go across the River Plate to Montevideo, and that gets heated. And then you go into Brazil, and then the rivalry between the Rio clubs and the Sao Paulo clubs, and then the clubs from Recife, um, and it's just it's something else. And then you look at um, like Chile with the Pinochet dictatorship in Peru, um, and it is brutal. And then you look at the corruption and the violence, and it is something that we in most of Europe haven't had to experience in our lives at all. Yeah, I mean, the politics and sport. I mean, Balotelli was a dirty player and nutcase. He still is. Balotelli still is. Always has been. I wouldn't say they're all completely fascist. It's just the thing with our generation is, apart from the Balkans and what's happening in Ukraine right now, is even in a lot of Eastern Central Europe, they haven't seen dictatorship. Anyone younger than the age of 31, 32 hasn't seen a dictatorship or a brutal, repressive regime in Europe. Um, apart from Czechoslovakia, I mean, that was more being part of the Soviet bloc, but they were not as repressive in Czechoslovakia um, as they are in what was the Soviet Union, what was the former Yugoslavia, and their ending of communism and the splitting of East. I mean, it does breed a certain. And you've got to be of a certain age, and I was born right at the end of the Cold War and the end of communism and the end of the end of this situation. The Yeah, look, the Czechoslovak. I mean, it's now two countries, and it was a peaceful separation, which is something that didn't happen in Yugoslavia. And it's same with Germany, East and West reuniting was peaceful. There was a lot of concern that it would be a very violent period, and it wasn't. The violence happened in Yugoslavia, and I've been to Yugoslavia. Well, the former Yugoslavia. I've been to the Balkans. It's a lovely part of the world. The people are completely mental, by the way. Driving standards, don't crash the fucking car, is the best way to describe their driving standards. If your car's still got four wheels and going sort of in a straight line, you're all right. Wrong side of the road. Have I crashed it yet? That's. I remember I was driving through Croatia with some family. The car in front was from Bosnia, and they were all over the place. And I'm thinking, shit, like, why? Well, water polo is the national sport. Why? Honestly, and I'm being honest with Croatia, it's got to be a sense of pride in not just football, but in every sport that Croatia um, plays internationally, including water polo, where they are one of the world's best. Sense of national pride. Um, and other European clubs, scouts, predominantly in Germany, are scouting a lot of these Croatian players when they're young, and they're it, the, the, the- they just have a production line. It clearly is Dinamo Zagreb and Hajduk split the two biggest clubs. Like it's just a production line. Um, yeah, Bruce Grobbelaar, obviously, and Rhodesia or Zimbabwe and South Africa, the apartheid side of things, the pressure that the international community put upon them with sporting sanctions actually did have an impact. Um, it did have a negative impact, and when you had basically the middle classes and who were being disenfranchised on a sporting level, who may not necessarily be involved politically in anything, and then you've got the wealthier black athletes um, who were in the economic pecking order and their families being disenfranchised because of the government. It put pressure on the government from within because that's when the white South Africans started turning against apartheid. Some of the best rugby players and cricket players couldn't play on the international stage, and you know they have a great sporting system in South Africa through their education, through their high schools. It's ridiculous. It's far better than here. Far better than here. And it ultimately put pressure on the governing bodies to go, hey, we've got to change this. And we as sports fans have missed out and this is why I think South Africa, in the cricket and the rugby union especially, and even in the football with the '94 Africa Cup of Nations, the '95 Rugby Union World Cup, the cricket, they had all these great players that we couldn't see for 30 years, and suddenly they all were still there, and they were fantastic in the '90s. And the cricket and the rugby union still to this day are fantastic, um, and shouldn't be underestimated. They continue to this day to produce world class players and be world class in the international level. There's a reason why South Africa have been world champions multiple times in rugby union and cricket in their various formats. In the sevens, in the 15 aside, in the cricket World Cup, in Test matches. There's a reason, and they're making up for lost time. Um, Most of the French players don't play in France. I think Mbappe is the only member of the squad that I can think of who's regularly starting. He's in the French league. The rest all play in the other European leagues. Um, so PSG dominating the French football is not the same as Bayern dominating the Bundesliga because the majority of German players come from the German league system. Um, and so there's the difference, I think, is where the squad, the club's the squad has been chosen from. I remember Gravison Everton. Yes, he was a bit of a loon. I mean, some of the players that we've listed as hard men. Um, Speedway, it's dying a death. It's very popular in Poland, Speedway, but Speedway is dying a death in this country. A lot of facilities have really been run down because they share facilities with dog racing tracks, and dog racing is dying a death as well. So two sports sharing a facility, not having the same revenue they were 20, 30 years ago, has had a knock-on impact. I've watched Speedway. I don't mind it, um, but it's definitely one of the forms of motorsport that is struggling. has been struggling, but isn't a great spectacle for TV. Really, it's hard to promote it because you're just going around in a circle for 6 laps, and that's it. Um, and as there's not a lot of money in the sport, and it is an expensive sport to keep running, rebuilding the engines of the bikes, the chassis, it's not a sport that's cost effective. And in a time of rising costs and lack of funds, it's going to struggle. It's going to struggle. It's been struggling for a long time. Um, Eastern Europe and Scandinavia have definitely carried the torch of speedway. It's one of the national sports in Poland, but there is a limit of how far you can take the sport with limited funds and limited international exposure and limited sponsorship and budget constraints and to a certain extent obviously lack of eyes on the product and that's the death of it. Yes, Maradona, I've discussed this, the Bilbao Barcelona riot. It wasn't just a fight, it was a riot. Um, and it hastened his exit from Barcelona to Napoli significantly. His relationship had already soured with the board at Barcelona at this point. Some of his teammates um, didn't particularly get on with him. It wasn't a happy relationship at Barcelona when he was signed. But he went back to Spain to Valencia towards the end of his career. So he had an affinity with Spain. It just went wrong at Barcelona. And at the time he is signed, it's just post the Franco regime. There was the attempted military coup in the Spanish Parliament. There was raised tensions in Spain at the time, politically and socially, between the Catalans, the Basques, the Castilians, the Andalusians. Um, so it, at the time he went to Spain, it was a very tense situation, very tense. And the Bilbao defence, the Bilbao team in the 80s were fucking brutal. And I'm being brutally honest, they were tough. And you've got to realise the cultural and social divisions between the Basques and the Catalans that go back to the 30s and the Spanish Civil War, where the Basques and the Catalans were on the same side, the Republican side, but they had different viewpoints and they didn't trust each other, and that has. And then you had the Basque separatist movement, um, and there were targets in Barcelona that were targeted, and there's a lot of tension between Bilbao and Barcelona for a lot of reasons. A lot of it's cultural, language, society, the fact that Barcelona's a little bit more secular. Bilbao is very, very arch, very, very Catholic. Even though Barcelona's a Catholic city, there was a lot, and inject a superstar like Maradona, and Bilbao still have their Cantada policy where it's all Basque or Basque origin players. You've got to either have played for another Basque club or you've got to be born and raised in the Basque country. The Catalonians have brought this superstar who, and the Bilbao team then and the Bilbao team now are still pretty good. And it was a rivalry that I think doesn't get the coverage it should. But when Bilbao play against Atletico and Real Madrid, it's nasty. Um, and when they play against Espanyol, it's nasty. And when they play against Betis and Sevilla, it's nasty. But there is, when Bilbao play and their fans travel, or when they're the home team, it's the Stadio San Mamés, the old San Mamés, and the new San Mamés, which is right next door. You don't want to be the away team or the away fan. You really feel the hate there. Um, Bilbao's ridiculous. Bilbao is ridiculous. Um, it's almost bordering on fanatical. It's not a tourist club. Let's just say that is a club for the city, um, and there's no getting away from that. That truly is. The other clubs like Real and Atletico and Sevilla and the other ones, a lot of tourists and celebrities want to have their photo taken with like your Messi's, Ronaldo's, and all that. Athletic Bilbao, nah, that's not for That's not for the faint-hearted. Yep, Eintracht Frankfurt, their support is insane. Borussia Dortmund support's insane, to be fair. Hamburg, Werder Bremen, um, these aren't the tourist clubs. These aren't, the Instagram. These are fanatical ultras. You are committed from birth. It's like Atalanta in Italy. As soon as you're born in Bergamo, you are an Atalanta fan. You are given a lifetime membership if you want it. The club reaches out to the newborn's family, gives them baby supplies, food, clothes, support, funding. It's something to see. When you have Atalanta and Bilbao, I mean, it's something different. It is something completely different because what you see with a lot of these the European Super League clubs is the big celebrities going, "I'm a Chelsea fan" or whatever, and then when let's say Man City, they're playing away in the Champions, they're going into the Devil's Den, and they're going in. They say Bilbao make the Champions League or the Europa League. I remember when Man United played Bilbao in the Europa League, and they were battered in both legs. The Man United fans were quiet. Man United team were intimidated, and then Fernando Llorente scored a brilliant goal over the shoulder, hit the ball, kicked the ball so hard he ruptured his knee ligament, and hasn't been the same player since. There you go. But the Eintracht Frankfurt, the VfB Stuttgart, the Westfall Stallion, the Westfall Stand at Borussia Dortmund. Um, it's you have to see it. You have to see it. It's something to go to a club like Chelsea, like Stamford Bridge, or go to Anfield. And you see that wall on the Kop, and or you go to St James's Park. Newcastle is one of those atmospheres where you are intimidated. The Den at Millwall. There are certain clubs where it is literally locals only. Fuck the celebrities. Get out with your Instagram. Sampdoria, Geneva, Hanover 96. Some of their fans are just ridiculous. Hertha Berlin, like these aren't the fashionable clubs. These are proper working class. St. Pauli and the other club in Hamburg. These are proper cold-faced working class clubs that still are. The fans are fanatical. People spend their life savings going to games. So they've got no pensions, they've got nothing. They've spent all their money, and it really is a commitment. You're born into that. It's like in Sevilla. You've got Betis and Sevilla. You're born a Betis fan. You're born a Sevilla fan. There is no, well, my brother's a Betis fan. No. You are born into that. It's the same in Dutch football. It's the same in Celtic fans. A lot of their fans actually come over from Ireland. Um, but you look at it, and it's hearts and hips as well. It is literally pure fanaticism, which you don't get necessarily in the Premier League anymore, because now it's become like and then some of the clubs you lose that passion and vibe. Espanyol gets forgotten. Their fans are lunatics. Abs- Some of the, I mean, I've been to a lot of states. I've been to Portsmouth. I've been to Southampton. I've been to Watford. I've been to the old Griffin Park at Brentford. I've been to a lot of clubs. Seen a lot of games. QPR, Loftus Road is a fantastic atmosphere for a small stadium. I've been to a lot of clubs around the southeast of England and the Midlands. Done a lot of football, and I tell you now, the most fanatical fans I've met at QPR. Honestly, the atmosphere at Loftus Road is actually quite intimidating for a 18,000 seater stadium. It's tiny, right on top of it, right on top of it. That is, in my opinion, an atmosphere you can't replicate. In my opinion, Palace fans, Crystal Palace, Selhurst, that is really intimidating to go to. Turf Moor when it's full, and I don't like Burnley, but that is intimidating. Ewood when it's full can be intimidating. Um, some some uh, people, what we see is the big six, not intimidating atmospheres. They're not intimidating atmospheres. Dinamo Zagreb and Hajduk Split in Croatia, Red Star Belgrade in Serbia. You've got um, uh, Steaua Bucharest, FC Cluj, Legia Warsaw. Legia Warsaw's fans are insane. You've got Legia Gdansk in Poland. You've got Poznan. Um, it's, some of these lesser known clubs that don't get the recognition, their fans are ridiculous. CSKA Sofia in Bulgaria. It's just Panathinaikos, Olympiakos, PAOK Athens, AEK Jesus, Greek football's insane. Apoel Nicosia. I mean, what I find Celta Vigo, Deportivo La Coruña, there's some just insane football fans out there. You've got Braga. I mean, they play in an old mine, for Christ's sake. They've only got two stands in their stadium. It's intimidating. You've got a sheer rock flat, a cliff. And you've got another cliff. You're like, oh, okay, we're in an open cast mine. We've got a stadium. Benfica, Porto, Sporting, um, and then what's the other club? There's another one in Lisbon. Oh, what's the other one in Lisbon? I nearly got a shirt of theirs. Really annoying me now. Boavista. There you go. Boavista, the forgotten club of Lisbon. Um, Absolutely ridiculous. Absolutely ridiculous. I mean, some of these fans are almost. It's like a private army. Like every match is a war. It's a battle. And I think what we've seen with the current Champions League format and Europa League format, we've lost some of that. And some of these other clubs are. And when we had this European Super League, you're killing it. You're going to kill that. You're going to kill that working class community. Fenerbahce, Galatasaray, Besiktas. There's another one, Borsenspor. I remember back in when was it? I think it was 2020 when the COVID shut down Christmas 2 years ago. I was on the phone to my friend Sam, and we were going through the Turkish league, and he was like, "Why are you doing that?" I was like, "Well, no one else is discussing it, so I'll talk about it with you." My mate Sam is a fanatical sports fan like me, and I was discussing the Turkish league, and he was like, "What the?" You know, and it's something you can't replicate, cannot replicate, and unfortunately, the money's killing it, pricing out some of these fans. And you've seen fan protests, and UEFA and FIFA would rather we didn't. Mainstream media, the TV, rather we didn't have the banners saying UEFA are robbing pigs and corrupt. Um, so there is that. Um, and we could say that yeah, Leeds is a fanatical sports city. So is Bradford. Fanatical. They're fanatical. Um, and money is slowly killing it. I think the TV companies would rather be, know, it, the fan protests were out of sight, out of mind, and it is something to be said. And then You see some of the atmospheres of this World Cup. I mean, some of the nations from South America and the Middle East and Africa have travelled really well. Um, and it's like the Morocco Spain game was like a Morocco home game. It's like half Casablanca and Rabat and Tangier just turned up and implanted themselves in Qatar. It's fantastic. And the Spanish just didn't like it. Brilliant. It was amazing. It's something that hasn't been seen for such a long time. It was beautiful. Um, and sadly, I feel that we are losing a bit of that. Um, and yeah, we've seen the crowd trouble. We've seen the issues that have taken place, not just here. And I was listening to Simon Jordan, and I don't agree with a lot of what Simon Jordan says. But you know, so far at this World Cup, not a single English or Welsh fan has been arrested. Not a single fan has misbehaved. And you could argue that the lack of drugs and alcohol has contributed to that. But then you look at what happened with St Etienne at the end of the last season in France. They destroyed their stadium, and one third of and a quarter of their stadium was shut for repeat breaches. And then you had Nice, Marseille, beginning of the season, massive riot. Um, well, I don't care as much. I mean, true, I don't feel the same vibe. I will agree with that. I don't feel as in tune as I would do if it was in the summer. I do agree with that. But it's the build up. It's the media reporting, and it's the criticism of the awarding of the tournament. The I wouldn't say 2018 was terrible, but I felt more a connection 4 years ago, and more passionate about 4 years ago than I do now. Um, look, actually, the Viking clap's taken over this World Cup. I've seen several teams fans do it. Um, Yes, I mean, look, there's atmosphere and then there's criminality, and I can't, and then we have to ask the question about stewarding, security, police costs, and ticketing, and the rise of incidents, not just in this country but across Europe and in Turkey as well. Um, the Bombonera, that's fantastic, isn't it? The Bombonera when it's bouncing, the stadium's falling apart, but the footage of it is stunning. I suggest anyone who wants to see what atmosphere is all about, there's so many videos on YouTube of Americans reacting to the rest of the world sports fans and comparing them to their own and their fake manufactured atmosphere. And then you look at South America and Europe and Turkey, and they're like, "What's this?" And then they look at State of Origin when in Australia, and they're like, they don't know how to process what they're seeing. Um, Oh, is there the most upsets, or is it actually going by the form guide? Because some of these teams that are upset the big team are actually well coached. They play well. Morocco and Japan winning their games. No, they're not upsets to me. I don't see them as upsets. What I see as upsets is Belgium not getting out of the group, Denmark not getting out of the group, Spain going home at the second round, Germany failing for the third tournament in a row, second World Cup not getting out of the group. Um, Definitely, the Japanese did not disgrace themselves. Morocco have definitely been brilliant. Their fans are fantastic. Saudi Arabia have a footballing pedigree, but they've been to World Cups. They've been to knockout stages before. Um, and we have to see what Morocco do against Portugal. If the Portuguese start with Ronaldo, Morocco win. If they start with Ramos, I think they're in trouble. Um, Australia beating Denmark doesn't surprise me. the way they set up is a softer version of the Morocco setup against Spain. They play exactly the same style. And Australia have had their best World Cup ever. Back-to-back wins and 2 clean sheets. They've never done that before. They've scored in every game. They've never done that before either. So the Australians have made progress. Um, well, their seasides. Hey, look, you've got to be what's in front of you, and I don't like these stupid full rotations of squads. You want to drip feed the occasional change for fresh legs here or there, and I think that could have a detrimental impact later in the tournament. Spain didn't serve them any good. Um, they did make it in 2006, but they only won one game in that tournament. They've won two in this one, and they didn't score in every game in that tournament. They've scored in every game that they played in this tournament. So, in my opinion, 2 clean sheets in back-to-back games, back-to-back wins, never done before. Best tournament Australia have had. Oh, look, we can all argue about the Tunisia result and whether it was, offside or not, and we can have a look at Deschamps. Should he have rested all those players? And will it backfire later in the tournament? And Brazil having those injuries, and they did that full squad rotation, and three really good players that are integral to their side now. Gabriel Jesus, Arsenal, Mikel Arteta's going to be ripping his hair out. New Zealand, didn't win a game, didn't lose a game. That's what's ridiculous. Is I think they were the first side to go home from a World Cup without losing a game. Australian, well, they're hosting the Women's World Cup next year, which I think is a positive, alongside New Zealand, which is causing other stadium issues for the NRL and the AFL, and the A League as well, with stadium availability, which is going to pose a problem should they want to host the men's tournament. I'm not sure the NRL and the AFL will be happy to do it again. So there's definitely a discussion in that regard. And that's a fair discussion to have. And it should be had. The NRL has made a bit of a mess this off-season in regards to stadium availability and their salary cap and their CBA, and they've been asleep at the wheel in regards to their domestic competition in Australia, and then the Women's Football World Cup, obviously, using a lot of their stadiums. The thing is, do they really need something? Or is that the media saying they need something? Because they've won international competitions now. So it's not as if they haven't won. They just haven't won a World Cup. I think with Messi, I think you can see he's part of a team. And the Argentinians have bought into their team. And it's not just the Messi show. Whereas with Ronaldo, what was proven last night is they don't need him. He needs them more than they need him. And with the Messi situation with Argentina, he doesn't have to play every minute of every game. And he's part of a very good Argentina side. Defensively, okay, we can argue about some of how they started the tournament in the first game, looking a little bit disjointed, but they're figuring it out. They've got a very good record going into this tournament. Portugal, on the other hand, they've proven last night they don't need Ronaldo. He needs them. Let that sink in. Messi, I think, looking at it, he's got a better goals per game ratio. Ronaldo's played more games, but he's had 3 extra years of a career. So bear that in mind. He's been playing for 2-3 extra years over Messi professionally. Argentina look a happier side with or without Messi. Doesn't matter. There's a clear unity in the team there. Ronaldo, Portugal don't need him. He needs them. They look better without him. And there's rumours about him disrupting the camp, carry over from Man United. Definitely, yeah. South Korea didn't make the final in 2002. That was a Germany-Brazil final, but they got a fair distance into the tournament and then didn't make the final. And you can argue about that Italy game until, well, we're all old. We all watched the game. We've all seen the footage of the game. The allegations are out there. There's a lot of proof to actually back up the allegations. But then 4 years later, the entire Italian league is swept by a match fixing scandal of their own. So it's kind of hypocritical from the Italian FA going, "You cheated. You fixed this," when actually at that same period of time, domestically, there was corruption going on of a similar fixing. It was Turkey who made fourth place. Turkey were in the semi-finals. Um, oh look, Bulgaria in the 90s were fantastic, but a lot of the ex-communist countries were fantastic at the time, like Romania, like Bulgaria, because of the state-sponsored sports programs that have been in place for 30, 40 years. Um, yeah, Turkey had a very good side at the time, um, and they had some, and Turkey's had their golden generation 20 years ago, of which Tugay and Emre and Muzzy is it, yes, that guy from Leicester City, were a part of. But at the same time, the UEFA coefficient, and I'm going to go back to this, has had a negative impact on some nations. The UEFA coefficient, with the legacy coefficient, when you win a Champions League or Europa League, has had a negative impact on Turkish football, on Belgian football, on Dutch football, Scottish football. And I think the UEFA coefficient needs to be got rid of, because as long as that stays around, the European Super League will stay around as an idea. Get rid of the coefficient, restructure the European competitions fairly, so that every league gets a fair crack at the whip. Bring back the Cup Winners' Cup, get rid of the Confederation Europa Conference League, bring Cup Winners' Cup back in that position, and suddenly you fix European football. Scrap the coefficient, the legacy coefficient, the European Super League will very quickly disappear. The reason why we have the structures we do currently before the next batch of changes to the Champions League is because of the big clubs in Europe wanting to stay the big clubs in Europe and not allowing the new clubs in, or that next wave, to have success. Because historically, Borussia Mönchengladbach have won more European trophies than Tottenham and Arsenal combined. In the 70s, Borussia Mönchengladbach won a lot of European silverware. They weren't invited to be part of the European Super League. Bayern turned them down. Borussia Dortmund turned them down. They've won Champions League. Hamburg have won a Champions League. So this notion that clubs like Tottenham and Arsenal have a right when Benfica and Celtic have won the old European Cup. It's a joke. The fan-led review. Look, the government is inept and incompetent. So we're on our third prime minister. So the prime minister at the time and the Secretary of Media, Culture and Sport is completely different now. We've had 3 prime ministers, multiple Secretary of State for Media, Culture and Sport. And so until we get a general election and stable government, which we haven't had for years, the fan-led review is going to sit there on the in tray and it's going to be pushed down the can. What we do know is Liverpool, Man United are potentially up for sale. You've just had the Newcastle United takeover not that long ago go through, and Chelsea. Chelsea and Newcastle were different, but similar outcome. The Newcastle takeover was delayed and obstructed. But don't worry about Man City, similar ownership group, that's okay. But Newcastle, no, we can't have that. So you can see the hypocrisy where was the complaints when Dubai were buying Man City? Where were the complaints when PSG were bought by the Qatari government? Suddenly Newcastle Saudi went, well, no, we can't have that. Come on, really? It's crocodile tears for me. In regards to the fan-led review, it's long overdue. I don't agree with everything. I'm balanced on this. I haven't read the full 50-point, plan that they fans groups are pressurised here. But I do believe in community engagement because these are community assets. It's been proven that professional sports teams have a positive impact on the community, economically as well as socially. Um, that's been backed up by debates in Australia as well about, you know, relocating clubs out of Sydney, or when they rationalised the NRL and they shrunk the NRL. In regards to the fit and proper persons test and financial fair play, in principle, great ideas, absolutely fantastic ideas. In practice, they are badly thought out. They are badly implemented. They're not fit for purpose, and they need replacing. And when you have Alexander Serafin, the, the day he takes over UEFA, he states financial fair play is not fit for purpose. The principle behind it is the idea is a fantastic idea. In practicality and how it's implemented is a joke. Absolute joke. If we're doing the 135% loss over profits rule, 70% of the Football League and Premier League are in breach. Points deductions, fines, and transfer embargoes. Can't be having that. So they're cherry picking the clubs that they go after because they can't go over all of them because it makes a mockery of the league and the EFL, the FA, the Premier League. And so automatically the footballing authorities have allowed things to get bad, and then in the good times, now the financial squeeze, the cost of living, price rises, lack of liquidity, less money floating around. Suddenly they're like, oh shit, we need to do something. It's too little, too late. And look, I'm not a club owner. I'm not a club board member. Or as someone looking on the outside in, it's called weak governance. It's when times were good, you know, they were lax in the implementation of their own rules. Times get tough, and they're on the back foot because if they were to fully implement the punishments of the breach of the rules, it makes an embarrassment of what's actually happened. And when you have 70 to 80% of your members breaking these rules for so long, to then punish all of them would be ridiculous. You wouldn't have a viable league. You wouldn't have a viable league structure. You wouldn't actually have match. But it would be ridiculous. You would then have players whose contracts have to be honoured, but by honouring them, you're in further breach of the rules. So then you come to the transfer market. We need to get these contracts off the books. No one can sign these players because they're also in breach of the rules, and so it becomes this impasse where the PFA have advised players not to take pay cuts during COVID. They're still advising players and therefore to stick to their guns to have their contracts on it. Then you have the Ronaldo situation, which is just makes a further mockery of the system. The Frankie de Jong situation in Barcelona is an absolute shambles. In fact, Barcelona is a shambles. But it's been allowed to take place because of the stature of the club in the game, because of the standing, the PR night, bad image that it has, because Barcelona itself is an institution. Manchester United is an institution. Because of these clubs standing in the game on the historical aspect of their success, it becomes a mess. And the fact that the De Jong situation, amongst other situations, Barcelona are still managing to sign other players and transfer. How? They can't even pay and honour a contract to. But Lewandowski was a free transfer, so they just give him a signing bonus, which isn't covered by financial. It's just ridiculous. And again, that is on the Spanish FA and La Liga and UEFA. That's not a domestic problem here, but it is a problem on the wider football community because it's having knock-on impacts in the transfer market, debts owed, money owed, unpaid bills. The whole thing's a mess. If that was, look what happened to Derby County, for example. Look what happened to Bury. Smaller scale, okay, but they Derby almost went to the wire. Bury were allowed to go under. Bolton were. It's cherry picking because Derby and Bolton have had more success, bigger clubs. Bury have had success historically a long time ago, but it looks bad when two ex-Premier League clubs are on their knees, but a club that hasn't been in Division One for 80 odd years, for example, is struggling. But they haven't been on the big TV. They haven't been on the Sky Sports. They haven't been on BT. They haven't been at the big level in the modern era. So they're allowed to fail. But two other clubs that have been in the big stage, on the big level, playing in Europe, right? Being, league champions in living. Oh no, we can't. It was a, it was basically a popularity contest about. I will let that club fail, but these clubs survive just. And Barcelona is a bigger version of a Derby County or a Bolton or a Bury. It's a bigger version because they're a glamour club, right? They're a glamour club. Boston was due to corruption, and they're still going. But the point stands. Barcelona is a glamour club. The reputational damage to footballers they were allowed to fail cannot happen. Cannot happen. But further down the pyramid, further down the pecking order, yeah, we'll let them fail. And it makes a mockery of the system completely. And it's not just an English problem or a German problem or a French problem or a Belgian problem or a Dutch problem. It's the whole fucking thing. And it's a shambles. The system is a shambles. And when I see on social media fans laughing at the English or the Scottish game, the British game, going, "Well, this is what you signed up for," I was like, "Actually, have you seen what's happening in Spain? Like a third of La Liga clubs are basically bankrupt. Spanish football's in a similar financial situation as English football, and Italian football. Italian football's financially in a mess. Spanish football's in a financial mess. French football's got no TV deal. They bled money, and they can't sustain their spending. And PSG makes a mockery of that because they can. And the only other club that can really sustain the level of PSG spending to a point is Nice because of Ineos, the wealthiest guy in Britain owns them. And even they can't sustain it. Monaco can't sustain it. And they're like, well, look, Monaco gets special tax breaks because they're based actually in Monaco. And they're going, we can't sustain this level of spending. And they're technically in breach of finance. So the whole fucking thing is a joke. The whole thing's a joke. And and people wonder why when they ask me, what's my favourite sport? It's not football. It's not football. It hasn't been for the best part of over a decade and a half, 10, 15 years. And when you've got clubs, admittedly, Limerick is in the Irish League, but one of the biggest clubs in Ireland going out of business. Yes, it's a much lower level on the footballing scale of things. It is absolutely atrocious. But again, the FAI of Ireland, so the FA of Ireland, the FAI is basically bankrupt. They've got money issues, and that then transpires through the FA here in England is asset rich, cash poor because they spent all the money on Wembley and St George's Park. They've got no bloody money. They've got assets worth money, hence why they tried to sell Wembley. Um, and it keeps happening. It keeps happening. Uh, I mean, the Manchester United situation, Liverpool situation, Aston Villa with the American owners, but Barnsley, Burnley are in trouble. And you're thinking, how? And this is historical. And this is also Celtic have had their problems in the past. Rangers at the moment, Celtic in the past. It is a ongoing issue that is the domestic FAs and then ultimately UEFA, then above that ultimately FIFA are not confronting because there's too much money in the game that's is just not in the right places, and it's not in the right hands. It's not being governed correctly, and absolutely shambolic. Palermo have gone bust in Italy. Um, I think Livorno went out of business. These were Serie A clubs, and Palermo, fantastic club, gone to the win. Lecce and Bari have gone tits up, and then you look at it and you're like, how? And then you realise, well, there's too much money floating around in the wrong places, too much corruption, and not enough oversight, and weak governance when times are good. So when times are bad, it's a shambles. And and then you look at it and you're like, this is a shambles. And yes, Southern Italy is very poor, and we can all agree on that. But unfortunately, this is a problem across the sport at all levels, across Europe and South America, whereby the people in power, when times were good, so in the 90s and the 2000s, when the money's just flowing in, the governance side of it, the FAs, UEFA, FIFA, CONMEBOL, whatever it may be, CONCACAF in North and Central America, for example, we're turning a blind eye, right? We're turning a blind eye to the chronic mismanagement. As soon as bad times come in the last 10 years, suddenly there's coming up these financial fair play rules and fit and proper persons tests. They should have been in place for 20, 30 years, and then they weekly enforce them. Look, we can definitely discuss the fate of former Football League sides being bad. I mean, Boston United they were fiddling the books there 20 years ago. They got found out, and it wasn't just one season; it was multiple seasons. They got dot points, and they ended up out of the league. I will do a video on Boston United, and we will discuss the financial turmoil at that club. Um, but this is, in my opinion, much, much deeper because you have to then ask the question, where's the fucking TV money gone? Billions, billions, hundreds, tens, if not hundreds of billions of dollars, pounds, euros, zloty if you're in Poland, for example, krona if you're in the Scandinavian. Where's all this money gone? Where's this money gone? And this is true. This is true. Where? And then we have to talk about agents and how unregulated they are and how murky that side is and the whole thing. The whole thing. For for go away steam. For decades, 2.5 decades, you know, and and I don't like ranting about it all the time because I do like talking about other sports and the positives and the good feel good stories. And we can talk about the Morocco Spain game, and it was a fantastic result for Morocco. We can talk about Saudi Arabia beating Argentina. We should be talking about these good things, but on the back of that, shambles. And look, we can discuss like Burnley back in the day. I understand Tennant, and we can discuss what happened to Gretna and Dunfermline having problems, and Clyde, and third Lanark going out of business in Scotland over the years, and Rushton and Diamonds and their rise and fall. I will do a video on that. Fantastic Rushton Diamonds, the best kit in Football League history. I did my videos on Berry back in 2019, and I was saying at the time, this is ridiculous. And I said back then, before COVID, the bubble is about to burst. COVID sped up that process. We would be waiting another 2, 3 years, and then we'll find out the bubble's burst. Because over the last 12 years, the economics has changed globally, just in economics. Yet football kept making money. Other sports were tightening their belts, cutting costs, making do. Football, the economy of football was like the subprime mortgage market in the US. It's built upon bad debt. Yet they've made these record profits. There's money hand over fist. Where has it all gone? Where has it all gone? Why are clubs racked with so much debt when they should be, having more money than they can spend? You know, I don't have Microsoft Chat. I don't have that installed. I don't. You can follow me on Instagram, and I can video chat on that if you really want. But I don't really outside of this do that kind of stuff. I like to try and keep this and other stuff sort of separate. Um, if and when the channel becomes financially self sufficient and I don't have to do my day job anymore, so when the channel makes money of enough standard where I can um, call my day job a day and focus solely on this, then I'll happily do meetups when I can. At the moment, firstly, it's sub-zero outside, so I'd rather not do it now. And secondly, I do have a full-time job and waste disposal. You can see my high vis stuff over there, waste disposal, um, and it's not particular. Technically, yes, I'm a bin man, but in America I'll be a garbage man, in Australia a garbologist term. I know it takes, but right now it's 5 past midnight. I'm tired. We've had some technical issues with the stream tonight. We still are having some technical issues. There is still some technical gremlins. The stream hasn't been perfect. It's a warning sign saying my connection is unstable. Please wait while we try to reconnect. I don't work in Waitrose, mate. I don't have a Discord now. I did for a little while, and I just got rid of it. Um, Never really used it. I had a Patreon for like a week, and I was like, "This is not sustainable." Um, and so I have this, and I have my Twitter, and I have my Instagram, which are linked, obviously, as they are. And even then, I barely use my Twitter and my Instagram to engage. Really, I found the best engagement is by making content, and I have done child athletic. It's on the channel. I have done child athletic. There's I think most of League One and League Two needs doing. Um, and I did Wigan the other day. I Twitter is I mean, the amount of fake bot accounts that add me on Twitter is ridiculous. I'm half tempted to get rid of my Twitter completely. I really am. Yeah, Charlton Athletic. I've covered Charlton Athletic on the channel. History of really interesting club. Their story really interesting with the Valley and how they didn't have a stadium and they were sharing at Selhurst Park, much like Wimbledon were, and Palace and Charlton weren't happy with the arrangement. The police weren't happy with the arrangement. Um, yeah, uh, I've never really. I mean, I look at my data, and what I've worked out is the viewership kind of. Um, the viewership kind of age ranges between the ages of 18 and 55. Yeah, I have a wide spectrum, and the most people are in their 20s to mid 30s, mid 20s to mid 30s, some our age group basically, because I'm 33. And I find that very interesting. That like 16 and 17-year-olds aren't engaging in sport like they were when I first set up the channel. I've looked at the data and it's just younger, if they are younger sports fans, under the age of 18, say 15, 16, 17 years old, when you're in secondary school and sixth form, are not engaging at all. And I find that very surprising as professional sport should be targeting the next generation of fans and players to your product. And I find that stunning. that young, because social media is the young generation's thing, and they're not engaging. Um, and I look at, well, you say that, but I think Mbappe and Bellingham uh, will be the next batch of players, I think, and Haaland will be that next batch of players that come through in the next 10, 15 years to be on the level of the Neymar, that will suddenly get younger fans and young kids wanting to emulate them, wanting to, be fans, play the game. And it was the same with Johnny Wilkinson playing rugby union. Johnny Wilkinson, um, for England in 2003, at his peak. A lot of kids picked up a rugby ball because of Wilkinson, um, which is why we have a lot of the players playing rugby union today in the England setup because of Johnny Wilkinson. Um, and I believe Haaland and Bellingham, and if Sancho can figure it out at Man United, for example, and Mbappe, is he the right role? Although of how much he's paid, but you know what I mean. And Phil Foden, and I look at some of the other young players at this World Cup. They're the next crop of talent. And there's some great young Brazilian players who aren't called Neymar who are playing fantastically. They're the next crop of talent to encourage young fans to want to play or get engaged. But I look at my data, the analytics. I look at the analytic data, and 17 and 16-year-olds. Well, the bracket's 13 to 17 because you've got to be 13 to have YouTube, right? That secondary school to sixth form, that kind of secondary education bracket, are not watching. And if they are in very minuscule numbers, or they're lying about their age on social media to be classed as the 18 to 25 age group, which is where a big chunk of my viewership comes from. And then you've got the 18 to 24, you've got the 25 to 34, and something that's the most popular. So the 1830 club, as it's known in the tourist trade, which is your 16 to 34 age group, the lads' holiday kind of, And what I'm seeing is that more older viewers are starting to view, and but when I first started the channel, there was a small percentage, a couple of percent of my viewers were teenagers, and that's just not the case anymore. Um, and you could argue Snapchat, TikTok, and Instagram, and the YouTube Short kind of. You could argue that, yes. I can agree with that. I find most of my engaged viewers are in my age group or older. Um, so I'm going to say mid-20s to mid-50s. Um, and the data, I think, is backing that up. And I did put up a post on the community tab saying, "Are young fans turning off sport? Are younger people turning off sport?" And I got mixed responses, but my data like backs up the fact that I think they are. Or they're lying about their age on social media so they can get a social media account where they're blagging their 18, 19, 20, and it's skewing the data. Um, I hate TikTok. Don't have it. Don't watch it. Don't engage with it. I never have and I never will. I had Snapchat for about 6 months. Again, didn't wasn't my thing. Instagram, just about Instagram. I barely go on Facebook or Twitter now to post anything serious. Facebook, I'm just sharing memes. I'm not actually posting any serious stuff. And Twitter, I just use the platform of Twitter to share these videos. But I would expect with some of my shorter content, especially when I'm discussing like players like Neymar and like Messi and Ronaldo, that there would be some engagement, even if it's for like half the video. If it's a 3-minute video, let's say half of it. But it does seem to me that there is and YouTube is catered for this younger generation. They're not interested now. What we are seeing at professional sports venues, like fans and attendance, the average age is slowly going up. Uh, for the most part, except in the US when it comes to football or soccer, the average age is actually coming down. Baseball, the average age of a Major League Baseball fan is 57 of fan in attendance, which is the average age of a football fan in the US is between 30 and 35. And that is proper surveys that have been done um, by actual sociologists at universities have gone out and surveyed. The average age of a baseball fan is 20 years older than an MLS fan, basically. So there is definitely um, something there. I wouldn't say the average age of a cricket fan is 83, but I think cricket has definitely got its strategy wrong since the Ashes in 2005. There's definitely something gone wrong there. Because I used to love cricket as a kid, and I still love it now. But I'm frustrated with the ECB, and I'm frustrated with the media rights that we currently have and the direction the sport has taken. They've made it less accessible, and accessibility is a big thing. I wouldn't say it's dead, but it's definitely at a crossroads, and there needs to be change across the board in governance and accessibility. Um, People will still play the sport, but it'll be at a much reduced level of competitiveness and professionalism if we continue down the path we're going, um, which says a lot, really. But we'll see what happens with the future of TV rights, accessibility, and getting. No, I don't think that's true. I don't agree with that. The South Asian community is a big part of sustaining the sport, absolutely. But I don't agree that the only people who do care about it are from Indian or Pakistani or Bangladeshi backgrounds. I don't believe that at all. Um, because even they are saying, you look at it, that there are still issues in regards to direction. I wouldn't say all the crap. Domestically, yes. Test cricket, not so much. T20, not so much. But definitely the first class game, yes. Australia and here, it's definitely a thing. South Africa, it's a thing. Um, and that is definitely to do with the direction the sport has been taken by Cricket Australia, by the ECB, and it's something that needs looking at. And I think fresh ideas in a different sense are needed, and the 100 is not the way to fix it. The 100 is not the way to fix the problem at all. Never has been, never will be. It's a sticking plaster on a festering, infected wound. Don't put a plaster on an infected wound. You clean the wound down. And I think the ECB and the board of the ECB, same with Cricket Australia, needs a massive clear up. It's a mess, and it has been since the Israel Folau saga a few years back, and even before then. What they're doing is they're trying to poach rugby league players by giving them massive centralised contracts that the sport can't afford in Australia. The collapse of Super Rugby as well. It's a shambles. In Canada, in Toronto, there's a massive South Asian population. In Vancouver and Toronto, there's massive South Asian populations. And they play. I wouldn't say that. I would just say that the administration of the sport, that's you know the Australian Union, has mismanaged it. You look at the NRL, and I can list you a whole starting 15 that would have got into an Australian state provincial side or the test side, who are playing in the NRL. I could name you a whole squad who at some point, either in their youth or at high school or in their junior days when they were about 16, 17, 18, were playing union who switched to league because the league clubs came along and go, look, we can give you a pathway, we can give you a starting salary, we can give you non-rugby training as well with education and support in if you don't make it in a trade or business career, whereas the support wasn't there from union. And the rugby league feeder clubs and the big clubs as well in the NRL were like, look, we'll get you on a training trial contract, we'll sign you up with our reserves, and we'll give you a pathway. I wouldn't say it's an elitist sport necessarily. That's a stereotype, um, which the media perpetuates. Um, but unfortunately, it's no, that's not true. Plenty of state school kids play it. Plenty of states, well, they call it public school in Australia and private school in Australia, but plenty of state schools globally play it. Um, it's the administration that's the problem. It's not purely a middle class sport. That is a misnomer. It's a stereotype that the media likes to portray, and plenty of state schools, both here in Australia and South Africa, play it. That's a complete stereotype. That is not necessarily true. Unfortunately, it's the government side of the sport. It's the administration that is failing the sport massively, and will continue to do so. Look at Wales. Look at England domestically. The club games in crisis. Uh, Australia. The domestic competitions in crisis. The Sheffield Shield is a joke. Attendance is poor. So if all these middle class people with money play the game, why is the game basically bankrupt? Please tell me that one. There are rugby union's got a lot of problems, much like football and rugby league and cricket. The money's not evenly distributed. TV rights is a mess, and the finances of the club game, the professional game, are a shambles, absolute shambles. Um, so there is that, and yeah, there are some sports where dominated by a certain country. Absolutely. All those countries listed, yeah, there are certain sports where they are bought in and it's like a pastime. And not only is it professional, it's also a hobby for people at all levels, amateur, semi-pro, and pro. Um, and with Ireland, you forgot hurling as well, by the way, the other Gaelic amateur association. But yeah, certain countries really do invest heavily and support and get the sponsorships and get the pathways right, and they get the governance of the game right in whatever sport we're talking about. And then those players go through that pathway. Then the big league, whatever country that sport may be more professional in, such as basketball in the NBA, pick up these players. Because of the state-sponsored programs of the communist era, they're still got that as part of their compulsory education. Water polo and swimming and water polo is part of their state education system. It's part of their syllabus. It's ingrained in them from a young age. Same with Croatia. It's ingrained in them from a young age. Um, I think it's compulsory part of their sporting curriculum until I think they're teenagers. It doesn't matter. They've got many Olympic swimming pools in Hungary. Big funding, big sponsorship, and I think every high school in Hungary has a swimming pool. It's part of their curriculum. Doesn't matter if it's landlocked. It's part of their curriculum. Bear in mind they've got Lake Balaton in Hungary, which is a thing. Japan baseball was to do with the just before World War II, baseball was becoming popular in Japan, and then obviously the Allied occupation forces, baseball was still the most popular sport in the US at the time, not American football, and that's why it took off in Japan. It's a historical thing, and a lot of the American GIs and Marines were playing it in their downtime, and the Japanese populace saw them play in this game, and as part of breaking the ice between the occupying military forces and the Japanese civilians, it was sort of an icebreaker. So some Japanese were invited to play, and then they already had baseball was already being played, but more Japanese kids and adults started playing it and watching the game, and it's taken off. Um, well, it's complicated in regards to rugby union because as I say, and I've covered this at length, um, Augustine Pichot was right that the game is not sustainable on its current footing financially. He's been proven right, but he's now, you know, turned his back on the sport. Um, he's got so frustrated with the administration side of it and the perceived inaction by World Rugby that he left the organisation. Um, the Dutch, they're speed skating, speed skating. Watch the Dutch speed skating, where they win all their Olympic medals at the Winter Olympics. Long track and short track speed skating. The Dutch are fantastic at it. Absolutely fantastic. It's terrifying. Speed skating. Winter Olympics. Long course and short course speed skating. It's ridiculous. Um, yeah, Jamaica in track and field is ridiculous as well. Um, is what it is. Anyway, I'm going to call that a stream because it's nearly midnight here. I appreciate the questions. I do apologise about the technical difficulties we have suffered this evening. Forces beyond my control. I'm not the only one locally where I live having internet issues. I do believe the weather's having an impact. I do believe infrastructure projects locally is starting to impact things. But yes, thank you very much for all the questions. Really appreciate it. And again, apologies for the technical issues we have sustained. But anyway, thank you very much for me, and I'll have some more content for you tomorrow. Or when I wake up, I'll get some more videos posted. I might do some more club histories. I might look at what's happened to Spain, what went wrong for Spain in this World Cup, and Belgium. I think they're two big ones we're going to look at. Done Germany, and we'll go what's wrong with Spain, what's wrong with Belgium, and we'll have some discussions about that. And from me, it's goodbye, and I'll see you all very, very soon.